And that's the only reason that Mike is hated in Toronto.
Yes.
But we are live. We always have to say something good to get everybody going. Yeah. I got lots of stuff to talk about today, guys. We're gonna have some fun. I was on the phone all morning about the PK Subban situation. I got all the ins and outs and all the cool things, and I couldn't write about because thanks for doing the show early today, because we are definitely. I have my daughter's in this really cool program at the University of Pennsylvania for she's 12 right now, and for women engineers of the future, and she got accepted by only one accepted from her school, so she's a bright little kid, and. So this afternoon they have this big parent thing. You come in and you see what they've been doing all week, and it's been amazing. They're just telling about the stuff we've been doing. So that's why it's at 3 o'clock, and I just couldn't quite squeeze getting. You never know about getting the Phillies, so I wanted to give myself some time. So.
Well, I'll provide a little instant update here. Literally 10 seconds ago, Chris Johnston from Sportsnet reports another break in the Subban arbitration hearing. PK did not look happy. ... at all.
Is he hiding out in the hotel?
It sounds like from that he's he's
definitely there.
Yeah, he may be in the meeting.
He's not.
Because unless Don Meehan is going to the room that he's at and giving him the blow by blow and whatever. But I mean, they're probably breaking for lunch. It's 12 o'clock, so.
Yeah, they've only been at it for 2 hours though. That's about. I mean, it's really these arbitration cases. We'll start the show, and let's just start the show, and we'll go from there. Let me get. Okay, you got your lower third up there, Ty.
Let me take care of that.
There you go.
The old toolbox here.
Yep. Yeah, it's gonna be.
Now that thing that I was talking about yesterday, the phone option, it didn't pop up today, so I don't know if that was a one-time thing or.
That's weird, isn't it? Yeah, you're right. It's not there.
Oh, okay. No, it's on. If you go to the little three dots.
Oh, it's down there.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, we'll have to play with that sometime and see if that works.
Yeah, that'll be good. I talked to a former agent today who I'm going to get on the air if he wants to come on next week. Who's going to talk to us. He was really interesting in going into this arbitration process and what it's like. And he told a great story, which I'll share before we go live here. It was he said he was doing
We are live.
Well, I know, before we go to the actual show.
Oh, okay.
What goes out to everybody on the podcast links. So if you're watching the pre-show, this is a little tidbit for you guys who watch us live. Yeah, so what he said, he had a story where he had a player who was going up for arbitration, and the team called in Bobby Clark as a witness. It wasn't the Flyers, it was a Western Conference team. And the team that called in, the reason Bobby Clark was called in was this team wanted to compare my friend's player to Jonathan Tucker. Remember good old Jonathan Tucker?
John Tucker from Buffalo, from the Sabres?
Sabre and one time Maple Leaf, right? Was he Maple Leaf too?
No, that's Darcy Tucker.
Darcy Tucker is who I mean. That's who I meant. Sorry, not Darcy Tucker's the guy. Sorry. So Bobby Clark, you got to think before you invite Bobby Clark to a wedding, because it's before you invite Bobby Clark to anything at all. So they bring Bobby Clark up there, and they're the team's trying to make the case that because this player had played on the Flyers at one point, and said, "Do you think that this player is comparable to Darcy Tucker?" And Clark's first words was, "Well, I never really liked Darcy Tucker as a player." The team had called him in, flew him across the country, and the first, not even really prepped him, and basically said, I would say he's better than Darcy. And it's okay, all right, no more witnesses, no more questions for the witness things.
Yeah, I don't like Darcy Tucker because he knocked Sammy Kapanen unconscious.
Right. So there you go. All righty, are we set now? All right, we're good. Ty, you still working on your third?
Oh, it's not up yet?
No, I don't see it.
Come on here.
You got to activate it on the on thing. You got to hit the on thing, I think.
I just updated the headline X for the webcast.
Into what?
You didn't include it on your blog.
Oh, good. Thanks.
Why is this not working?
Yeah, it's kind of confusing. It doesn't matter. Can't get it going.
We know who you are. No worries.
It's in the Hangout toolbox area.
Yeah.
There you go. You got it.
You got it?
Yeah. Oh, you like the? Somebody likes the Chewbacca mask I have in the corner there. Come on now, that's I have captured the head of a Wookiee, and I'm proud of it. So I keep it here, next to me. It's good to have.
Not saying a thing.
In honor of Comic-Con, I put it back there. Now it's out of the view. All right, so let's we'll do the introductions. I'll say Mike, and then you can say I'm Thy Anderson, and then we'll go from there. All right.
Sounds like a
plan. 1st of August. Friday, August 1st. Here we go. 6
weeks till rookie tournament time.
Yeah. It doesn't sound good when you make it like that for some reason. To me, it's like that's 6 more weeks of podcast without anything at all. All right, here we go. Hey, Hockey World. It's August 1st. It's a Friday, and it's the year 2014.
I'm Michael Jello.
And I'm Thy Anderson.
And I'm Eklund, and you're watching the HockeyBuzzCast on HockeyBuzz.com, coming a little bit earlier today. But, you know, in honor of PK Subban, we thought we should get this podcast going because today is PK Day. We'll talk about other things later. Of course, we want to start off with all the stuff that's going on with PK Subban, and there's been a recent development by our buddy Chris Johnson, who's from Sportsnet now, right? Yeah, these guys in Canada. I always think of him as was he CBC or was he was the other one?
He was Canadian Press.
Canadian Press, right? All right, so he was CP. So now he's on the Sportsnet, and he apparently is who is I think hiding in the bushes at the hotel where they're doing this arbitration. What's the latest, Mike, that he tweeted out?
He tweeted out about 5 minutes ago that there was a break in the in the arbitration hearing between Subban, Don Meehan of Newport Sports, and the Canadiens, and apparently a bunch of lawyers and the arbitrator. And the report was that PK did not look happy at all in leaving the hearing. So, you know, whatever that means, but you know, we'll go over this, but you know, I'm surprised that it's gotten this far. I would have thought that, like all the other arbitration hearings, this would have been settled, but I don't know if this is a battle between the short-term deal and the long-term deal or what, but this can't be good for the Montreal Canadiens, let's just say that.
Well, at this point, Ty, I think it's about respect and money. You know, that's what it feels like to me. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, this is a player that I think he is the Montreal Canadiens and what they are moving forward. You have to pay him no matter what it is, I think, and I think he knows that, and he's not going to ask for the moon, I don't think. I mean, you know, the reports are that he's asking for quite a bit. Yeah. But he definitely deserved it. He did last year, 2 years ago. This is a player that he welcomed the challenge of the Montreal Canadiens to a bridge contract to prove his worth, and he's done that. So now it's a time, you know, where he does get paid, and it reminds me a bit, tying into the Boston angle here, of Tuukka Rask last year. You know, he signed that 1 year, prove yourself type deal. He was unbelievable. They lost in the finals, but it really showed you that, okay, Tuukka Rask is the guy. Right. And I think Subban has proved that he is Montreal's #1 defenseman. So at this point, you have to pay him, and I think everyone besides the Canadiens is aware of that at this point.
That's what it feels like. Everyone but the Canadiens. And we had Kevin Allen on yesterday was kind of saying the same thing I was saying, but even after talking to people even closer to the situation than I had talked to, is that he wasn't getting the impression the Canadiens were treating PK, you know, like he was PK Subban, like he was a Norris Trophy candidate, like he was one of the top guys in the league. And, you know, this goes back to last year. Like I said, the Olympics, they weren't exactly, you know, touting him. A lot of teams were pushing their players, you know, to the Olympics, saying, yeah, you got to bring him on, you know, you got to get him. I mean, the whole situation that we saw in so many cities of Flyers, like definitely words with the Canadian teams about putting Claude Giroux deserved to be there. You know, even though they don't, you know, necessarily you don't always want your player to go to the Olympics and get hurt or whatever, but the players look to their teams for sort of a little bit of a boost of respect and, you know, scouting reports and like that, and they weren't really doing that for PK, and I think that's sort of when this whole thing started to go awry, in my book. And then, like I said, the loss of Gerard Gallant, who was PK's sort of confidant on the team. There's a lot of things that happen here that lead us to a weird spot. And now the decision by the Meehan Group to have PK in the arbitration hearings, which is a really rough one. You know, the NHL, this goes back a little while. I talked to some people today who were agents or former agents, and this goes back a while. The NHLPA, for obvious reasons, wants the players in these arbitration hearings. They basically say you don't have to put them there, but they want them there, and they want them there for good reason, because with an arbitrator, it's better, they feel, to have a human face there to put this all to. You're not just talking about some guy who's not in the room. You're talking about this man here has put up these numbers and deserves this amount of money. And but the other side of that, of course, is things have to be said in these negotiations that you don't necessarily want to tell the player, and you want to protect the player. If you're the Canadiens, if you want him to be there long term, if you're hoping to get a deal done in the next 48 hours, you don't want that, there to be bad blood. And if we're seeing PK Subban coming out of this meeting, Mike, like he's not happy, then you have to ask yourself, is that occurring? It might not be. It might just be, listen, these are negotiations, and PK Subban's not a lawyer, and it's a different scene when you're put into these spots, like if you've ever been involved in a heavy negotiation, and I have been, they're intense, and things are said both ways, and if you're not educated or trained to deal with that, even if it's not the worst thing in the world, it can still feel weird. It can still feel contentious, So Mike, we don't know really necessarily whether
no
bad things have been said about them in these to try to make their point or not, but.
Yeah, I mean, right now we're in, interpreting body language and frowns. It's like, I mean, come on. I mean, I'm not dissing what Chris Johnston reported, because he reported what he saw, and
Chris is really good.
He's a really good reporter, and I have all the respect for him in the world. But I mean, right now we're left with only interpreting things like that. We're not in the room, so we don't know what's going on. But all we can see outwardly is the. And you said the word respect. I think that the Montreal Canadiens have been more skeptical about PK Subban than most any other NHL team has been about their best player. A couple years ago, when he held out through the beginning of the lockout shortened season because he wanted the long-term extension. They wanted the bridge deal, and everybody patted Mark Bergevin on the back for getting the bridge deal. And if you look back now, the deal that they offered Subban at that point, or the deal that Subban wanted, was 5 years, $25 million. You tell me the Canadiens wouldn't be taking that deal right now?
Oh yeah, well this is typical.
They ended up shooting themselves in the foot by being hardliners. And what may be at work here with Subban and Don Meehan is the fact that, okay, we took 2 years at a discounted rate. He won the Norris Trophy, so now it's time to pay up here. And if Montreal's saying, we're going to give him fair value, but we're not going to pay up and make up for that, then I think the compromise here is a 1 or 2 year deal, making probably between $7.5 and $8 million, where he's the top paid defenseman in the league, but then he gets to go unrestricted. And if he goes unrestricted, the way things have been going, he might be gone, because Montreal just doesn't seem to value him as much.
Well, let's take a look for a second at the at HockeyBuzz.com here and the Montreal Canadiens salary cap, because when you look at this whole, you go into Cap Central here on our website, you can see the interesting thing about the Canadiens is all the players that they have. We talked about last year, that the team we looked at yesterday was, I forget who we looked at yesterday, but they had
Pittsburgh.
Who was it we looked at yesterday?
It was Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh, right? And they had a bunch of players signed in 2016-17, actually like 8 or 9 guys. The Canadiens have this year, together, and then next year they've got a lot of players as well, as you can see here. But the big number that jumps out to me is the top players. If you go through teams on the Cap Central in general, you are hard pressed to find another team that doesn't have a forward making over $5 million a year, or a defenseman making over 5.75. These are, now there's obviously prices, but he's Carey Price, so just take that off the table. They have really an interesting group of of the way they're hanging their salary. They have a lot of money tied up in Markov and Emlyn here, for sure. But those are 2 good players, and that's $4 million. That's fine. But your superstar players, they don't have any. There's none. I mean, beyond Carey Price, there aren't any in here. And the superstar player is obviously this big RFA dot here we're looking at, right? This is it. This is PK, and that has to get fixed. Now, they have a lot of money tied up this year, so it's tricky for them. But they should have been planning for this. They should have left space, obviously, because PK is going to be, he's a lot of money. They have the cap space that says here they have here for this year is $11 million. They really don't have to sign anybody else but PK Subban. Look at the chart here. They're tied. They've got their whole thing worked out. So, and Montreal is never hurting for money. Okay, so the Montreal is going to spend to the cap no matter what. I mean, they make more money than any team in the NHL. So, because they have two full worlds that follow them, a whole French Canadian world and a U.S. world. More people watch. The amount of people that watch the Canadiens on French TV is astonishing. The money that's made from it's just when they're on. I remember one time talking to Yvan Pinot about this, and he was basically saying, listen, this team, this team can put together, every one of their broadcasts on RDS is over 1 million viewers, and when you think about that, you compare that to a situation like in the NHL, Comcast, Sportsnet. They show, say, a Flyers-Penguins game, which we think of that's probably as top as you can get for a Comcast Sportsnet game. It's going to get a lot of views, right? The views for Comcast Sportsnet for a Flyers-Penguins game isn't even half that. Compared to, that's the entire country of America, compared to 1 million people watching the Canadiens on only French TV. So now take the American version, the American TV of that too. So it's just, not English, sorry. Horrible mistake there. Take the English part of that, and in English Canada, and that's just what you get. So, yeah, I mean, this is now I guess we have to sit back and say, okay, is PK Subban worth this? Just let's step aside for a second and say, okay, we taking the player aside and the fact he's their star and he is their personality and everything to them, and they play him all the time. Is just as a player on a regular team, say PK Subban's on Boston, Ty, what do you give him?
You give him the $7 million, the 7.5, whatever it is. I think that this is the impact type of player that a team needs. If the Montreal Canadiens lose PK Subban, they will miss him the second he's gone. They will realize what a mistake they made. Yeah. And I think that it's different. He comes with personality and things like that is frowned upon for some reason in the hockey world. Which is ridiculous, because you can't take away what he does on the ice. And on the ice, he is one of the most dangerous players I think that you can watch. When that guy tees it up from the point on the power play, you think it's going to be a goal almost every time. That's just how we are here in Boston. I think you see him, oh, here comes a goal, because then most of the time it is a goal. But that's the point. But it's the franchise player, I think, and the Montreal Canadiens have to be done toying around with him, or they're going to lose him and really regret it. I completely agree, and I mean, I remember watching one moment that sticks out with me at PK Subban was this year in the series against you guys in Boston, and I want to say it was Game 2, towards the end of the game. I think it was Game 2. The Bruins were winning, and PK had played like the last 5 or 6 minutes of the game, just played like an unbelievable, and was in the offensive zone forechecking and down below the net and making all, and just completely. And I'm thinking, this is a defenseman, who's already played 30 minutes. He's down there. I mean, that's just, he's got he's their best forward. He's their best defenseman. He's their best player. And this is interesting how this is playing out in Montreal. There's so many different ways you can go with this as far as respect goes, and the fact he held out a couple years ago, is that playing into this for the Canadiens? Are they upset with that? What's the relationship with Thr and PK Subban and the Olympics? And these arbitration things are very interesting because well, first of all, they still have 48 hours to get a deal done, and I think they will. I don't think that this is going to be. There was a lot of questions about this today because, Mike, as we talked about earlier today on the phone, the thing about the arbitration process is it's kind of like the floor mats of the CBA. Like it's like when the CBA is negotiated, the arbitration points are thrown around a lot. Like, oh, we'll give you that cap, but we want this in arbitration, or we want this in arbitration. We'll give you that number on years on. But so arbitration has changed every CBA, and it's very confusing as to what the hell it is. Like at this point, there was a point when you can only pick the high number or the low number in a negotiation in arbitration. There was a point that mattered if the team went or the player went. And there was a point at which the arbitration began directly now, like so that once you entered into arbitration, there was no negotiating a deal. That changed many years ago to now. And I talked to it's interesting. I had a couple talks with the agents, and one guy said, one time I was in with an arbitrator. We were in with an arbitrator, and we were working on a similar situation. It was a big name player, and we were about an hour into it. And the arbitrator looked at both of us and said, "Listen, guys, honestly, you're both saying the same thing here.
I'm going to take lunch for an hour. Go figure out something, and we'll be back after that. The arbitrator is not trying to. The idea of an arbitrator and arbitration is to come up with a deal. He doesn't. The worst case scenario for any arbitrator is to actually have to hand out a deal. It's kind of similar to judges in a way. They have a similar thing. The judge, and remember we talked about this in Phoenix years ago. Remember this, where the judge didn't want to determine what was going to happen in Phoenix. Because it's like judges don't like to set precedents. They don't like to be. They want this to be figured out between the parties. So this arbitrator, and he said, I would bet anything that the arbitrator sits there and says, okay, this is ridiculous. Go try to figure out something. And the reason you have 48 hours between this is not that it takes the arbitrator 48 hours to decide on a number. It's literally. It's like gut check time, right? It's gut check time for the players, because after the arbitrator meets, of course the entire thing is gaming the arbitrator, getting a feel for the arbitrator. This is what's happening, right? So you're getting a feel. If the first thing the arbitrator says is, wow, numbers are kind of similar to Shea Weber's. That's interesting, and that's the first thing the Canadiens hear from the arbitrator's mouth. It's like continue with your point, And then the Canadiens are like, whoa, hold on, whoa, that's not good. That doesn't sound right. Well, and then so this whole thing, and that's when these deals can get struck, and that's when the fear of God comes into the play. So that's, I think, what we're going to see here a lot. I think we're going to see they met this morning trying to get this thing done. They met last night trying to get this thing done. They couldn't have been that far off if they were meeting. I heard, however, though, that the number that Subban was asking for was over 9 this morning. So that number is then you do start to get ridiculous, right? But I think that sounds like a reflex action to the fact that the Canadiens are offering $5.25 million. Like,
right.
So PK's like, screw you. If you're going to go that low on me, I'm going to go back to 9. Mike?
Yeah, I mean, based on the arbitration figures that have been out there on the previous, I think it's 21 cases, nobody had a differential of $3.3 million.
Yeah. Most of the contracts weren't even $3.3 million that were handed out.
Right. The Canadiens came in at 5.2. Subban came in at 8.5.
Right.
So, if there is a 2-year deal, if there is a short-term deal, I don't think the first number of that contract is going to be an 8.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a 7. They're not going to get away, especially. And the thing is, I don't think Subban is using the benchmark of guys like Letang or Phaneuf or the recent long-term deals.
No, it's Shea Weber.
I don't even think it's Shea Weber. I think he's looking at Kane and Taves. I think he's looking at, these guys got $10 million bucks. And those contracts take into consideration,
right.
Where the cap is going to be in 3 or 4 years.
That's
now, right. Now Montreal. I mean, we were looking at Cap Central before. I mean, Montreal may be looking at the fact that a guy like Galchenyuk is an RFA next year. He's coming off an entry-level deal, so he'll probably make a couple $1 million bucks. Brendan Gallagher, I'm sure, Brendan Gallagher coming off the entry-level deal is not going to want, is not going to want a bridge deal. He's probably going to want a long-term contract based on the way he's played in the first couple years of his career.
Right.
So they may be looking at, okay, we gotta keep Subban under control here and show them show what they're doing with him as an example of, okay, we're not going to relent. But you can't do that with a guy like this guy. He is your star player. You have to pay him. If you don't, you're gonna reap the whirlwind in a couple years.
No, 100%. You are, and this is I mean, I know we've got Chara's negotiation coming up, Ty, pretty soon. And there's another player, and Joe Chara is not entering his prime like PK Subban is, but still, I mean, I hear the Bruins are already working on that, basically.
Yeah, I mean, the plan for Chara is to keep him here for the rest of his career, and I think that's basically what it's going to be at this point. He is the Bruins equivalent of a Nicholas Lidstrom.
Yeah.
They've already won the cup with him, and they've got to a second one with him. So it's not like a Ray Bourque situation where they'll have to trade him to a contender. So he's going to be here forever.
Right.
And when I say that, it sounds dramatic, I suppose, but he will be here for the long haul.
Well, if any player in the NHL is going to be there forever, you're right. I mean, he would be one.
Yeah, I mean, their cornerstones of their franchise are Patrice Bergeron and Zdeno Chara, and that's it. I think everyone else they are willing to move on from. Maybe not now, but I'd be very surprised, for example, if Tuukka Rask finishes his career in Boston. That's just based on their organizational depth down the pipeline at goalie and their history, I suppose. But going back to the Montreal Canadiens, I think what's tough to sort of stomach here if I'm PK is that I look around at the rest of the Montreal roster. Yes, they do have Gallagher and Galchenyuk coming up. But this is a team that was able to sign Max Pacioretty, a 40-goal scorer if he had been healthy for another 10 games this year, at $4.5 million. I mean, it's almost like they're too used to the bargains. Meanwhile, they're paying Andrei Markov almost $6 million a year, and I think PK Subban is a much better player than Andrei Markov, and I think everyone knows that here in 2014.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. And that they are... And there are another thing that was brought to me today along those lines, Ty, is that an agent said, there's a lot of reasons a team and player go to arbitration. And one of the other ones is the team, whatever the arbitrator rules, is a different thing than if the arbitrator gives, let's say $7.5 million for a 2-year deal or a 1-year deal for PK Subban. The negotiations come up with other players. It's different than if the Canadiens had given him $7.5 million, because the Canadiens can sit back and say, the arbitrator gave him that number. We're not, I mean that's a high number because we never would have given him that number, but the arbitrator gave him that number, so we had to take it. But we're not going to don't use him as a comparable when you're trying to talk to us about money, and that's what they do. I mean, we saw that with Ryan O'Reilly, Mike. I mean, that was basically the whole, with the same thing that the Calgary Flames, they offer sheeted him, so we had to make that, but that wasn't his real deal, so that kept them okay with Matt Duchene and all that to give him that kind of money.
And then we know that the internal salary cap of the Avalanche came into consideration when they went to the club selected arbitration, because their whole goal was to keep O'Reilly on par or below what Duchene was making. In the case of Subban, I mean, I seriously doubt that the Canadiens are trying to keep him on par with what Carey Price is making. I mean, you can argue who was more valuable, Price as one of the top goaltenders in the league, or Subban as one of the top defensemen. But the reality is that defensemen are paid more. And I know that Subban can't go in the hearing and use a guy like Kane and Taves as a comparable because they were free, well, not free agents. Well, they're unrestricted free agents. They would have been unrestricted next year. They were extensions, but I don't think they can use those as comparables. But if you see that players who you deem as an equivalent talent at a different position are making 8 figures, then you want 8 figures. And if he's prepared to give Montreal a hometown discount and say, okay, I'll take 9.5, and Montreal's not interested in paying him over 9, then you're talking 2 completely different languages here.
Definitely, you definitely are, and that's a problem. I mean, and now we know this other baggage exists. We know this other stuff's out there, and now we get to the point where they're in this meeting today, and I mean, I got different reviews on this. That the natural thing is what we're saying, that the player is going to be pissed off or it's going to have a problem going forward. And then I've had other agents who say, well, players are smart enough. They know that this negotiations. They go in there, and this stuff really doesn't affect them much. And then another agent who said, well, usually the stuff said is not as bad as you might think by a team, because the team also is trying to earn the arbitrator's respect during this process and can't just say something stupid. Can't just go out there and say, he's not as good as Emlyn or whatever, or he's not as important as Emlyn, or he's not that important to his team when they just played him 35 minutes or 60 minutes a game in the playoffs every night. It's hard for the Canadiens to go out there and make, he's a Norris Trophy candidate. There's certain things you just can't get away from. He was a Norris Trophy candidate. He was on Team Canada, even though he didn't play in the Olympics. He was an Olympian, and that still counts, right? So these things count, and they are an effect. They do have an effect, and so he said teams don't say the worst things in the world, but this is coming from an agent, and then again, knowing players are sensitive lots, and especially players like PK, who already wear their hearts on their sleeve. He's not. PK is like one of those take them warts and all type players. And that to me is something pretty cool indeed. That and I like the fact that PK is that way. I like the fact that that's what you get with him. But then throwing him into a negotiation like this, I don't know. I mean, I question Donnie Meehan a little bit doing that. Although, you think you're going to get better, and it's better for the NHLPA is probably making a lot of pressure because this arbitration doesn't just matter to PK Subban. This is the kind of arbitration that matters to the entire NHLPA.
It may not be Donnie Meehan's choice, Zach. I mean, it may be the fact that Subban wants to find out right now how much the Canadiens value him. This is the moment. If they value him, they will pay him. If they don't, if there's still doubters, if they still think that he's, going to be a great defenseman, but they're not sold on him being a top echelon defenseman, then that says everything.
Yeah, it does say everything, and I don't know. Looking forward, it's a tricky situation. We'll talk more about it for sure as the day goes on, and if anything else breaks here. But I do want to get on to some other news as well, because there is some other news. There's not a lot. It's a very slow news day today. Being the 1st of August, we've had some other situations that have worked better. But I do have the one thing I saw that kind of struck my eye was an article written by, I've never actually seen this guy before, Hot Takery. You guys familiar with Hot Takery at all?
Warming up to it, yeah.
Ty, you are?
Yeah.
I've never.
Why do you say that like that?
Because I think it's one of those terms that's sort of been. I'm always afraid of hot takes because they're always kind of asinine most of the time. So. Right. But I do enjoy it in a way.
All right, it's the first time I've come in contact with him, and I know one time I went to somebody's article that I hadn't read before, and then I got all kinds of heat from my other bloggers saying, that guy's an idiot. Why would you ever give him any time? But this one, this guy's putting together a team. His latest blog is kind of cool. It's just it's team. I'll show you. Let me put it up here for a second. I liked it, just because it's a little bit of what we talked about, and it gets into a good discussion. And the concept of the blog is, and this is at hottakery.com. So it's hot takes Team Hart versus Team Corsi in an NHL 14 simulation. And you know me, and I love my NHL 14 simulations. So to me, this is so he puts together this whole, bringing in the uniforms there for the teams. But he puts together a team of, a roster here, of players, with heart, and it's Carcillo, Bolin, Thornton, Ronaldo, Brown, Glass, Barch, Sestito, or Gesick, Scott and Jansen, Orpik, Murray, Karkner, Engeland, Rosehill, and Sheldon Brookbank. I mean, those are all, the team's going to get killed. But it's got a ton of heart on it. And then this is Team Corsi, which is, these are the Corsi guys: Pacioretty, Bergeron, Voracek, Marchand. There's two Corsi Bruins right up top there: Koivu, Jágr, Gallagher, Backlund, Tarasenko, Tatar, Jokinen, Riley Smith, another Bruin, Vlasic, Giordano, Timonen, Niskanen, Brody, and Muzzin. All right, so what I really not, this is a cool article, and I was going to actually see if this guy wanted to come on and talk about it at some point because I thought it was kind of neat. And I'd like to see the simulation of what that does, but because I think one team will get killed because the one thing that NHL 14 doesn't take into account is heart. But this brings up Corsi, which I wanted to talk a little bit about with Ty, and because we have never really discussed Corsi with you and your thoughts on it. What are your thoughts on this?
I believe it's an extremely useful tool in today's NHL, and I think you're seeing teams are starting to warm up to the idea of analytics in general. The New Jersey Devils just hired, a blogger, an analytics blogger to work for their team.
Yeah,
it's extremely interesting. I do think that in a way it can sort of skew things either too negatively or too positively one way or the other. For example, 2 years ago, Johnny Boychuk was extremely high. Everyone loved his advanced stats and things like that. And I was a writer that watched Johnny Boychuk every night. Right. Where I wouldn't agree with that. I thought that Zdeno Chara masked a lot of his mistakes.
Yeah.
And things of that nature. But he was an advanced stat darling. So I think it can be it's very useful, I think, but people can be skewed too negatively. Or too positive one way or the other, and that's why it's sort of it's not my go-to, I guess, best way to put it. I do like still watching with my eyes, but I do look at the numbers at the end of every game and try to see what stuck out and who had a strong game and see if my own eyes cooperate with what those numbers and those figures are saying. Most of the time, I feel like it does. I thought the fourth line for the Bruins was sort of a mess in the playoffs for them. And it turns out the numbers did back that up, that they were not a strong line for them.
Right.
It's cool when you can look at it and go, hey, that matches up with what I thought. But yeah, it's something that I think the writers out there that cover it do amazing work. Travis on our site does a great job with it. And elsewhere, I think there are writers that are really sort of making a name for themselves by devoting themselves to this, which I think is interesting. But for me, the biggest thing with Corsi and advanced stats in general will always sort of be the underlying sort of arrogance that you feel coming from those people sometimes.
Yes.
That's not to generalize and say they're all like that, because I've met some great people, obviously, that aren't. But
nothing underlying about it, Ty.
Yeah.
It's an excellent. I never have heard anybody say that, Ty, and I totally agree with you. It's just never really occurred to me that what was bothering me. But you're right. The way it's reported on is like these numbers are God.
Yes. And if you don't agree with them, you're an idiot and you're a Neanderthal who appreciates fighting. And it's like, no, I appreciate strong defensive zone play as well. I do value. I put value across the board here. I don't rely on one thing alone.
Well, let me just say, from taking a quick glance at that article and the lineup, it's not team heart. It's team heart without talent, because that's what that lineup is. I mean, okay, I think my team heart would have Jonathan Taves. Would have some, not every third, fourth line goon that you can think of. Colton Orr and John Scott. I mean, give me a break.
Right.
That's where, and then see, the thing is, like, again, I'm of the older generation. I do not buy into Corsi as a definitive analytic way of determining the value of a player. I'm not sold on it yet. I'm not closed-minded to the idea of it. I just haven't been convinced yet.
I love stats. I mean,
I do. I do too, and it's like I said, being somebody who played Stratomatic hockey when I was a kid, you had to love stats. Shooting percentage, and a number of other things were indicators of a player's offensive abilities. I'm open to that, but sometimes you see these guys, as Ty said, who are Corsi darlings, and I look and like, okay, what's so good about this guy? Because I watch him, and I think he's okay, but I don't think he's God's gift. So until there's more scholarship on this, until there's more work on this, I'm yet to be convinced that Corsi and Fenwick are the end all or be all of determining the value of a player.
Yeah, and I watched Kimmo Timonen play all year. And he's a Corsi darling on this list. Obviously, he's in the second pairing defense, and this is Kimmo's worst year in the NHL. He definitely had problems this year. He was struggling up and down, and he's always a smart player. He's a great player, and he's going to be, even Kimmo's worst season is a top 4 defender in the NHL. I'm not saying, but this just wasn't Kimmo's normal, standard. This is more like, there you are, Ty, you're back, nice and
unfrozen.
You're animated now. That's what I want to see. Animated.
Let it go.
There you go. Let it flow. So, but I was just saying, I watched Kimmo Timonen this year, Ty, and he's like, this was his worst year. But he's a Corsi darling still. So, and as much as we love stats and talk about Stratomatic, and I really do want to get a Stratomatic game going here, Mike, with you online. You got to send me a link. We got to do that, because I ordered the new cards, by the way, the new Stratomatic cards. And as much as I want to do that, I want to it makes me insane to a degree that these team heart, but what I liked about this article is the argument of heart versus Corsi, and what I have a tough time with still in Corsi is the fact that this sport is not baseball, and this is not like a one-on-one sport. This is not pitcher versus batter.
Right.
Baseball is the most interesting. One of the interesting things about baseball, and what I think really is great about baseball, is that it's a team game, but at the heart of it, it's one-on-one. Right. And there's no other sport that comes close to that. And because it's one-on-one, pitcher versus batter, statistics are easier to determine because it's obvious this is what it is. It's not that there's no other players like you're saying. Boychuk's out there with Chara and his Corsi numbers are great. If he's not out there with Chara,
you wonder.
Middle of the road.
I'm sure Matt Carl's numbers with Chris Pronger on defense were phenomenal, but once he goes down to Tampa Bay and he doesn't have Chris Pronger there, I'm sure his numbers have gone down. Now, the thing is, it's always the eye versus the stats.
Yeah.
And I look at it I watched every Maple Leaf game last year covering the team. A guy like Jake Gardiner, who I think is a valuable young player who they just signed to a 5-year contract. You look at the stats. You look at the fact he scored 31 points. It was only -4 on a team that gave up a ton of goals. Yeah. You think, okay, he's got some of the best Corsi numbers on the team. You watch the game and you see him giving away the puck in the defensive zone, him making bad decisions at times, and you think, okay, the numbers are lying here because the quality of the defenseman does not match the numbers that are out there. And there are other players like out there like Mikhail Grabovski, who again is a Corsi darling and is not as good a player as his numbers indicate.
One thing I want to go back to you, Tyler, and just think about this. It's going to maybe a couple seconds to think about before I get your answer. But yesterday we did something that was kind of interesting, where we came up with our bottom 5, our prediction for the worst 5 teams in the NHL next year. So as I read through some of these other news stories, I'd like to get yours because we all took plenty of heat. There's no reason you should get out of the window there.
It's true.
So yeah, So think about that for a second, then we'll get back to you. There is some other news today. I just got to bring my notes up again. Okay, here we go. I'm still learning my new computer here. Sorry, I got this. It's crazy, but I'm actually working off of a faster computer, and yet we're having more technological difficulties than ever. So I'm starting to wonder if I am screwed up here or not. Let's see, where is this? Did you see this, by the way? This is I don't know if you. I don't know what the. I'm sorry. I'm going to go back to that. Never mind. Sorry about that. I hate when I do this.
Well, one interesting note while you're looking it up,
I appreciate it.
There are indicators that Timo Selanne may play for Jokerit in the KHL.
Right.
He's retired from the NHL. There's a note on from one of the Anaheim beat reporters that the Ducks intend to retire his number 8 at a ceremony at a game sometime this year. But there have been indications that it's Jokerit's first year in the KHL, and that there are indications that he may play for Jokerit next year. So I think that would be pretty interesting because he's a legend in Finland, obviously, and we know he can still play. So in a way, I wouldn't have a problem with that. I mean, I really think that would be cool in a way.
Doesn't he own a team over there, though?
It may not be in the. I mean,
I think it's in the Finnish league, correct?
Maybe in the Finnish league, yeah. I'm sure.
Else when we need him. He would know this because him and Kimmo are partners of a team in Finland in the Finnish league, and I thought that's where he would go back and play. And it would make sense to just go back and do that. So Brian Leetch, here's a little quick story. Brian Leetch will not be returning to his position as NHL Department of Player Safety. Mm-hmm. Brian Leetch on his own is left. It's not just nothing else, nothing big, but it's not just a little newsy. And now, Ty, you're bottom 5 in the NHL.
While I cop out here, that is a thankless job. Can we please stop putting NHL legends in that job?
Yes.
There was a note earlier in the week while Ty thinks of the rest of the bottom 5. In the wake of the departure of Dave Poulin and Claude Loisel as assistant GMs of the Leafs, there was an indication that Loisel may be a candidate for Shanahan's job at the NHL as head of Department of Player Safety. Now, Stefan Quintal took over after Shanahan went to the Leafs. It was an interim. I haven't heard anything about him staying on there, but Loisel has worked at the NHL offices before. He's been a scout. He's been an assistant GM. And obviously a former player with the Islanders and a few other teams. So it's not a stretch to think that he might be a candidate for that job, and I believe it would keep him in Toronto as well. So.
And his 1,149 career penalty minutes qualify him for this job. You have to have a big penalty minute guy get that position because they have to understand. Is that the deal from the other side? That's why we have like Shanahan was like what 1,500 penalty minutes in his career.
Craig Gianni's not going to get that job.
Oh, for sure, for sure. No, I agree. That's, and there is also speculation that Brian Leach could be joining a team as an assistant coach. So we'll find out more about that too. But I wouldn't mind Brian Leach to be my power play coach. I mean, that guy could run a power play like no one's business. So, that's something to think about. All right, Ty, you're up.
All right. So number 5 here, I think Edmonton Oilers. And that's so I know everyone beats on the Oilers constantly, but
the funny thing about that is, Ty, Kevin Allen, myself, and Mike yesterday, none of us put the Oilers in their bottom 5.
Right.
Really?
After I left, after it actually occurred to me while I was driving around the afternoon, like, why did none of us put the Oilers in our bottom 5? So continue.
Yeah, I see these minor additions, and I just go, I don't really see how they're going to do anything. I think the Western Conference too is just going to beat them down. I think that's such a big part of it, more than anything else. So yeah, I get the Oilers there. I also have the Carolina Hurricanes. I'm never sold. I know you like him. Cam Ward, I think, has been very brittle, and when he's not, when he is in the lineup, it's been very subpar for me as of recent years.
Yeah.
I think Anton Hudobin is a good option there to platoon him with, but I still don't like that team in that division.
I also put them in the bottom 5, so you and I agree on those two. Yeah, I agree with them.
And then you're 0 for 2 with me.
0 for 2 so far. Go ahead.
My 3 is Buffalo Sabres. Now most people have them as the worst team in the league. I think they made enough additions where they're not going to be as horrible as they would like to be.
Yeah.
They are paying Andre Mazzaros over $4 million, which is a crime in my opinion. There.
If you're gonna tank a season, though, that's a good way to do it. Like, give Mazzaros a guy who's most likely only going to play 30 games because of injuries, and when he plays, will be terrified that he's going to get hurt again. Yeah, bring him in, and he'll be the guy.
Yeah, but the thing is, Zach, if he does get hurt, they will not put him on injured reserve because the whole purpose of signing him for that much was to make the cap floor. So he's not,
We all had Buffalo. We all had Buffalo yesterday, Ty. So you're with us on that one. But
all right, and then I had Calgary Flames. I mean, I like Hiller. I think Hiller is a pretty good goalie. But they gave a truck of money to Derek Engelland, and that blows my mind. So when I look at that contract, so I have them as my number 2. Number 1 for me, Florida Panthers. I look at that team and I go, what were you doing? I just look at the whole offseason. No idea what's going on, and it's not Bobby Lou's fault. But I mean, it's going to be a tough year for them. I think. Dave Bolland, very overpaid for what he is. I mean, this is a guy who 4 years ago we were talking about what a rat he was in Chicago. We weren't talking about this amazing gritty character guy. We were talking about an instigator, and now he's going to be the face of your your franchise, or down the middle he's going to be a second line centerman. I mean, I just don't buy that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's mine.
That's a good 5.
Right there.
No, I like it. I mean, I was the only one I think who didn't put Calgary in the bottom 5. I think that they're going to be. And I didn't put Florida in the bottom 5 either, actually.
No, I didn't either. I put the team that I think all of us picked was Ottawa.
Yeah, we all picked Ottawa yesterday.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, I think Florida. The thing is, I think Luongo's good enough to keep you from being the worst team in the league. Like, I think he's going to win enough games, and their division they're in too has its moments. Because they're going to play a lot of games against Buffalo. They're going to play.
Well. I see. This is the thing. I think it's an advantage for the teams, and it's only a couple games difference. But I think it's an advantage for the teams in the Atlantic that they're in the
Atlantic Division, Metro Division.
Sorry, no, not in the Metro. That they play Ottawa and Buffalo either 9, 10, or 11 games because those teams are horrendous.
Yeah.
And I think as compared to the Metro Division, which I think is a little more balanced. I mean, I agree. I think Florida's going to have a difficult time. I think the Islanders are going to have a difficult time.
I had the Islanders and the Devils in my bottom 5.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're going to have a difficult time, but I think they've made enough additions that they're going to probably be like maybe 10th, 11th, 12th around there. But I think that Toronto, Detroit, Florida, Tampa, they're going to all benefit from playing the Sabres and the Senators so much. It's going to give them a little extra boost in the standings.
Well, what's funny is you look at the Central Division. I mean, that division is loaded.
Yeah.
You look at it and you go, okay, someone's going to have to lose the majority of these games.
Yeah.
And so I thought about, well, okay, maybe Nashville, but I still like what a healthy Pecorino can do, and what Shea Weber and James Neal. I think these are big additions for them, and so I that's what kept them out of my bottom 5. Because you look at that division, someone has to lose. Is that Minnesota? Does Minnesota take a step back? Does Colorado maybe take a step back? You look around, it's kind of hard to pick in the West.
That's a really tough division. There's my thing with Nashville in the Central. If you look at the LA Kings record versus Central Division teams, it's really good. And the Predators are a version of the LA Kings. They're built the same way. They have the same kind. They don't have the offense the Kings have, but they have the defense, and they have the same. They play very much like an old, Patrick Division team, like the Kings do. And that's not the Hawks. Don't like to play those teams. The Blues don't like to play those teams. So that's why I think the Predators are an annoying team for those teams. They're the team that when they look at the schedule, that's going to be the easiest team we have, but they never are. And it's just when it's hard, and that's why the Preds are always in it. And I also think there will be a bit of a bump with Laviolette. I think that his first year in teams has been pretty good in general. He has success. His early on message, it grows. It's definitely a shelf life type message, but it grows pretty quickly. I think so. But yeah, I mean they could be. Colorado is a really interesting one, and I thought about Colorado, not to the bottom 5, but are they going to make the playoffs? That's a real. I would take a bet on that one. If someone said me, oh, they're definitely going to make the playoffs, I would think twice about that. That's going to be tough.
They lose Stastny, but they add Iginla, they add Brad Stewart. I mean, they add some quality veteran guys. I mean, I don't think they added enough on defense, which I think was.
That's the thing, right? And the defense is the thing, and the goaltending. I'm still not totally there.
Yeah, I know, but and then they did add a guy like Briere, who as we know, is a clutch player. Even in his later years, he can still do it if he can stay healthy. No, I mean, I mean, I'm more questioning. I have more questions about Minnesota without their goaltending. I mean, they still really have a lot of question marks with Backstrom, with a young kid and Darcy Kemper. And I just don't know whether they have the goaltending to carry them into the playoffs. Nashville, I mean, it's sort of a hodgepodge. I mean, you bring in Jokinen, you bring in Ribeiro, you bring in Derek Roy. I mean, if these guys play up to their capabilities, they have a chance of fighting for a playoff spot, and if Rene stays healthy. But there's a lot of ifs there.
Oh, they're a team of ifs. I mean, especially up front. Those guys we're all very iffy.
And, we've always said that the LA Kings were challenged offensively. If you're saying that the Nashville Predators are like the LA Kings, but they
not
don't score as much. LA Kings up until recently, that was their main problem, was they didn't score.
Yeah, I mean they have Jeff Carter. There's no one like Jeff Carter on the Nashville Predators. I mean,
true.
This year Jeff Carter is going to. Here's one of my wacky predictions. We're going to do a wacky prediction day, but next week I want to do a wacky prediction day. Maybe we'll do next Friday because we got Ty. It'll be fun. We each got to come up with 5 just predictions that someone would say you're crazy. Okay, but so I'll give you a hint because here's one of them for me. And this won't be in because I'm actually writing 30 of these because I'm not going to write a blog about this. This is one that I'll leave out for tomorrow.
Save one for
next week. But I think that Jeff Carter will pass Ryan Getzlaf this year. I think he'll actually surpass him as a player and in points and just in general that you'd say you'd rather have Carter than Getzlaf, and that's a big deal because Getzlaf's was an MVP candidate. This guy, he's a serious player.
That is wacky.
You're laughing.
That's as wacky as saying that in the first Bruins-Leafs game, Phil Kessel will throw down with Milan Lucic and beat the crap out of him.
Yeah, that'd be a fun sight.
Yeah, you see, this will be fun next Friday. Here's my other one. Here's another one, just as a hint, but because I have 30 of these, like I said, because I write 30 weird predictions every year. There's another one that I'll leave out for next week. The 2 teams in the Eastern Conference Finals will not make the playoffs this year. The Rangers and Canadiens will not make the playoffs, and that I do feel it to be true. We'll see what happens, but I'm not convinced.
Speaking of sort of the Central and looking at the Avalanche and things like that, you see what they added and you like it. But then you look around. I think that Chicago's still better. I think that St. Louis is still better.
Yep.
And then I look at what the Dallas Stars have done, and I say, they're number 3. So look at it. Someone's going to have to be a wild card or be left out. And then it comes down to, all right, well, who in the Pacific, can battle for the wild card or not. So it's tough to look at a team like Colorado, even with all those veteran additions, and say, yeah, they're going to make it. You just have no idea. It's just it's way too of a wild card, no pun intended. It's just crazy over there.
Oh yeah, and and you're right. I mean, and at some point, I mean, is Edmonton? You think Edmonton's the bottom 5? I mean, if they don't make the playoffs this year, that city is going to explode. I mean, they've got to at some point make the playoffs or make a run. But there really is no sense that. I mean, you look at the 3 teams in California, and those are your 3 teams that make the playoffs in that division, right? Those are the 3 teams. So then you're talking about wild cards. So now suddenly they're competing against the other teams in the Central, and then that's really dicey. I don't know.
I think the 3 teams in California, unless one of them has just major injuries to key players, I think they all get in, and I think every one of the Western Canada teams doesn't make it. I think Calgary's rebuilding. Edmonton, we've talked about. Winnipeg is, the questionable goaltending and the Evander Kane thing is hanging over them. And Vancouver is a loony bin. I mean,
you had Vancouver in your bottom 5, didn't you, Mike?
I had Vancouver as a potential bottom 5 pick. Yeah,
that's huge because that's a team that they still think their window's open. They're playing this season like their window's open. They're not playing this season like a rebuild at all.
Yeah, their hands are in, the window's going to close on them.
All right, that's all the time we have for today. It's we appreciate you guys. There's no Q&A today, guys. We'll do a Q&A again on Monday. Apologize for that, but like I said, I got my daughter's thing, so I got to run too. And we had some fun talking today, and by Monday we'll know where PK Subban is, and I'll be able to take down the 50 or some candles that I've lit outside our front yard to the PK Subban homage that I'm holding out there. But we'll know by Monday because it'll be 48 hours from some point today, I guess.
Sunday,
I still think it gets settled without an arbitrator. And I think but I don't know that it's going to be long. I'm not going to say it's going to be 8 years, but I don't think it's going to be 2. I'm going to say.
Let's make a quick prediction.
4 years, $30 million. That's my prediction.
Ty, what do you think?
A little bit, less than probably people think, but I'm going to say, let's say 40. Yeah, 4 years, 32. 32 would be $8 million per, right? Yeah, so 4 years, $30 million. Yeah, that's what I would say. Ty?
Yeah, we're on the same, average salary. I got 3 years, 27.
Okay, Mike.
2 years, $17 million, so 8.5 per, and then he goes free agent in 2016.
You guys are both higher than me. 327. That's 9 per year.
Yeah. I just think he's got him over a barrel right now. I mean, look what they paid to Lars Eller. I mean, I think Subban could get that rate for sure.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. All right, guys, we'll talk to you soon. Remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey. Have a good weekend.